Welcome one, welcome all. Thank you so much for joining us, the Folk Filmmaking Podcast. Once again,
Dan
we
and
have
Joel here.
Dan and Joel, we're back at it again
Special episode
to
today.
bring you a very, very important episode.
Yeah, so we released one of our most labored over movies, Chlorine Kills, which came out May 1st. And we wanted to do a podcast. I think a lot of filmmakers, they make a film and they put it behind a paywall and they, kind of hide it from the audience until they can, buy it. But the film is free on YouTube. What's also nice is we're going to show the whole film while we're on this podcast, or at least a good portion of it. So you can see some of the images. Obviously, you won't know the context, but
We will clue you in sometimes about what's happening and the exclusive emotions that were felt on set as we were capturing these frames. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest thing is how long it took, how arduous, a lot of tears shed, a lot of work, effort,
time, money,
sicknesses that we went through.
literal, so many things that could have possibly gone wrong on this production. What was your experience like making the movie?
It's a huge contrast to the original Chlorine. It's hard not to sort of set up the idea of making this with the original, because the original was, I think you'd agree, Dan, one of the easiest of our feature film productions. Not that there weren't hard times, but it felt like from the beginning of the concept to finishing it up, I just felt like every step it wasn't belabored. We were excited. We were just like, oh, yeah, what if we did this? And we would go out and do it. And it would just look so good. One of my favorite parts of the original was the batting cage scenes. And I think a similar sort of location was the park where my character is, interestingly enough, buried, was a very similar scene in Chlorine Kills.
And what's cool is we actually get to start. This movie features a lot of clips from the original, and we actually start the movie. The first scene is actually a new scene that was actually a short film that we kind of wrapped last minute into the movie. It was just kind of like a straggling little short film that we had filmed and we'd never done anything with it, and then found a little good nugget in there. But the original film, we use a lot in this movie, and in terms of there's a lot of moments where refreshing people on who a character is, or showing a vibe of something from before. There's a lot of moments where the original film, you can feel the DNA of it from just a metaphorical sense of things that we show, but there's also little direct references. This movie was so much harder to shoot than the first, but I think in a lot of ways we were doing a lot more. So I'm not surprised. Just beyond all the craziness, I think we'll get into that at some point. Beyond the craziness, I mean, there's so much more cutting. There's so many more angles. There's so much more. The pacing is so much different.
And the editing is, I would say, is one of the completely different. I mean, it's just Frankenstein with how many different cameras were used.
I would say at least over 5. I think there was at least 5. There's the red Komodo. There's my Sony. There was a few wedding videographers who filmed the funeral. Joe, my brother, actually filmed with his iPhone for one of the shots that ends up in the movie. Literally
Pocket Cinema. There's the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema.
Blackmagic Pocket Cinema. Yeah. So that's at least probably 5 or 6 cameras right there. And to match all of that was, I mean,
there are plugins, but Dan only found that out after the editing and color correction process.
That's one of my favorite parts of the title card. I love this moment. It's funny because when you click on YouTube, if you hover over a video, you can see a little blip of it, and the blip is the title card for Chlorine Kills.
Oh,
which
okay.
I thought it was really cool.
How does that generate? Do we know how that generates on YouTube?
I don't know if I think it's just random. I think it just picks a random moment.
I wonder if at any point it uses the most popular by watch time, and it might show that. It has to be some sort of algorithm that sets it up. Anyway,
my dad, which was, I mean, I think this is probably the best way to segue into at least a little bit about my dad. He's probably the most important character in the movie, even though he probably doesn't have that like comparative screen time to a lot of other
Mm.
characters. I think his performance and subsequent, everything that happened kind of changed the movie more than anything else. I mean, when I was originally brainstorming this, I had pitched my dad back in 2020 the idea of doing a Chlorine sequel, and he wanted to be named a character called Propane, and that was like the whole joke. It was like, and it was funny. Um, and then I took it more seriously and was like, oh, that'd be fun. And then developing him into the father character just made so much sense from just like a creative, like we kind of knew in the last Chlorine where Pool Boy was from, and his father is referenced a lot
Yeah.
in the original, and so it just kind of made so much sense to me to be like, okay, well, we've talked about the father, we've built him up, he has a lot of character development. Why not give him a whole movie? And the whole movie was supposed to be about the dad, and there were supposed to be two Chlorine movies. You want to talk a little bit about
Yeah,
that?
I do remember my first. It's interesting because on this channel we have done a couple breaking of the stories,
Yes.
and I think I the only reason I want to bring that back is because of the way that Chlorine ended up happening. Because it is so you talk about the Frankensteining of the shooting, the cinematography of the film, but you don't even realize how much of a Frankenstein of the story had to be done.
Hmm.
Because I remember your first idea, your first pitch was like, okay, well, if there's like we got to have a stronghold, like there's a house that needs to be
Hmm.
protected, and then I remember the time that you called me up and said, I have it, I have it, I know how we're gonna integrate my dad into the film, and you in the beginning of this film was in your head really early on in the process. I remember you telling me, "Oh yeah, we're gonna have the younger version of my dad's character,
Hmm.
and then we're gonna sort of match cut to his current day where he's at to sort of really develop his character because it is the not the MacGuffin, but it is like the character that gives the rest of the characters in Chlorine, the first one, all of their motivation. It gives them all where did they come from. And what's funny is that your dad actually is in the original Chlorine, which
Hmm.
we had to, my favorite part of Chlorine Kills is that we didn't know that the dad character was going to be the dad character. Your dad was going to be the dad
Hmm.
character because we used him in the Assassins Anonymous scene.
Yeah.
And that was huge. But when you look back at it, us coming up with a reason why your dad's character is still part of the Assassins Anonymous, but doesn't recognize you or talk to you as a father son dynamic in that film, is what creates the majority of his story in Chlorine Kills. So everything you see here is basically just how would he not recognize you in Chlorine 1? And then using the justification for that to create his whole story. That's the genesis of his story.
Yeah, and I think it was an interesting moment because I think we do something very risky with his character because
Mm.
I think like you could very easily be like, how does he not recognize him? Like I don't buy
Yeah.
it into it.
Yeah.
And it was hard because like so much of the moments that we would have had to develop that, I think we would have delved a little bit more deep. Like so for the audience who hasn't watched this, like hasn't watched the film, doesn't know us, doesn't know anything about us. My dad passed away during the production of this film, about halfway, maybe even shorter than halfway. And basically it made us so that we had to work with only the existing footage that we had of him. And I think like there was a lot more in the original scripted version, like the outline version of it was there was a lot more going into the fact that my dad's character has like memory problems. He
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
he can't remember things. And there was going to be this whole enforcer character who kind of turns into the Aaron Carter character in this movie. In a certain way, he sort of plays the same role, but just like more on a phone call. But it
I
was
think he's
supposed
more like the technician almost,
yeah,
more of the geeky version of like the enforcer is a little bit more just like the field
yeah,
ops unit, whereas like I think Aaron Carter's role was always sort of like the guy, the brains behind the
yeah,
whole operation that's been waiting for like a power vacuum to sort of um happen so that he can take over power in the business.
yeah,
And to be fair, a lot of people one of their big comments on the thing is that okay, they don't buy that we're like hitmen,
yeah.
which is weirdly enough the sort of the genesis of the idea was like, wouldn't it be cool if like these most unassuming hitmen ever, like we're in the suburbs of Chicago and we're doing all this stuff. But I think if anyone looks like a hitman, I think your dad absolutely
Well,
encompasses what a hitman
it's
actually is supposed to
it's
look.
actually really funny because I think that comment makes so much more sense for the first Chlorine, but I really feel like with the second Chlorine, we definitely like everyone's aged up. I mean, think about it. It's been a couple years.
Yeah.
Everyone looks a little bit older. We have my dad's character who plays like the crusty old hitman. Like
Whether
there's no way you can't say that my dad does not look like a hitman in this movie. Like I like maybe all the other characters, but I think that's the beauty of Chlorine is it's meant to be sort of ironic. It's meant to be sort of like, oh, this guy's wearing, flip-flops and he's killing people.
I mean, an alternate title for this could be like the unassuming hitman,
Yeah.
or like so you just would never expect
Yeah.
that person to be a hitman. But that's why his character works, is that you'd never expect him to really find his way out of these situations, but he ends up doing it.
And I think the movie, and this is a great moment because we have Nathan on screen. I think Nathan is possibly, and I hope he takes no offense to this, he does not come off as a threatening presence, like physically. Like he's a shorter guy, and he definitely does not seem like he'd be like a good antagonist to Pool Boy. And I think that's actually why I was so excited to cast him, because I think he brings something unique to the role. And I think he really did a good job with what we gave him, because he can't go off of just like physical prowess. Like, Pool Boy's a big guy. He's a big dude,
Yeah.
and I think the stereotypical sort of, movie thing is like, we have Bane, he's going to break Batman's back, or he's going to, kick his ass,
Very overarching, very large presences. And but then you think of like Goodfellas and Joe Pesci's character, who is a little bit more, he's on that side where almost the fact that he's like shorter gives him that like sort of like anxious energy that he's always sort of like gonna, I don't know, go crazy at the drop of a hat almost.
And I think that's kind of what we do, but I think it's still done differently even with Nathan's character. And I think Nathan's character really brings a sort of unhinged, also like weird reverence for, like, he's kind of like a stand-in for like the fans of Chlorine almost in a weird way. Like he kind of knows all the lore, and he knows the names and the code names. One thing that was really, really funny to me when I rewatched the original Chlorine, the name Pool Boy is not said once.
Really?
It's not said one time.
Oh, really?
Pool Boy is the only time he's references Pool Boy is in the credits.
Interesting.
And only since the subsequent short films and movies and discussion and lore has he become Pool Boy. And so Chlorine Kills is, I believe, other than maybe some of the shorts, like one of the first few canon times that I'm actually referred to as Pool Boy directly. And it's kind of interesting. I thought like, oh, for sure we must have at some point. And then I was thinking about it, and I'm like, no, there really is no moment where we call him Pool Boy at all.
I mean, isn't that just a carryover of, how do I say it, like script speak almost?
Yeah.
Where you have to name a character.
Yeah.
Pool Boy should technically not ever be called Pool Boy, but it's just because of the independent style. We're just like, well, let's just call him Pool Boy, because I think the fact that there's like everyone refers to him by like this weird moniker, and weirdly enough, I think plays on what we were already talking about, how the characters aren't as, normally or just overarching characters that people would be really scared of in reality, but then sort of giving them those names, I think adds to that, like, why is this person even like considered to be scary at all?
I mean, there's a moment in the original where they just say, are we gonna get him out of retirement, or we're gonna get the guy, or he's the dude? There's all these moments of like hushed reverence for Pool Boy's character, but he's never called Pool Boy directly. And I think it was an interesting moment to realize that this was like the first film that really like references Pool Boy in the way that I think we talk about him on this channel, and we talk about him in short films, and the discussions that we've had about him subsequently. I think it's interesting. I don't know, that was just like a random aside, but I was thinking about that, and I was just thinking there's something interesting about giving a character a name, which I think Pool Boy has become kind of iconic. Maybe one of the few things from that original film that I really truly feel like it was iconic was like the Pool Boy character. I think it's just like he's kind of a interesting.
Well, just the fact that a pool man is the hitman, like the fact that someone who just tends a pool.
Yeah,
it's like if you think of the fake job of like a hitman, which of
Yeah.
course Pool Boy's case is not a fake job; it's a real job.
Yeah.
It's the last person you'd expect to, which is like this weird dark comedy sort of aspect that I don't think, there's a lot of ways to sort of watch Chlorine and sort of interpret the story. And I think a lot of people that have those takes of like this doesn't work have there's this super serious view of the story and therefore sort of attach that feeling to it, which I get because there is killing, there is death, there is violence.
It's definitely a more serious movie this time around, but I do think like the one thing that I loved about the original Chlorine, and I think the whole Chlorine franchise, is it never strays away too far from having fun moments. Like even when we did the screening of this movie, and there were people who were saying there were fun moments, even though there's like a lot of death and depressing moments. Like
Yeah.
there's still like fun scenes. There's still scenes that make you want to, watch the film, that are enjoyable. It's not just like a slog or a depressing ride or anything like that. I think it's definitely a darker tone than the first film, but I still think like it still has its moments of levity when it can be.
Yeah, another part that I will forever love about Chlorine is it lets you breathe. I'm a huge fan of slow cinema.
Yeah.
You don't have to be always, having this crazy action. People are running after each other, screaming. Been watching 24 recently. 24 is very close to my heart. And that's what it is, right? It's like super intense. Every scene is an interrogation or a helicopter flying or someone dying or the president calling up, what's going on? What's going on? And this is the opposite. This is people are hiding in plain sight. And that's why I sort of like the covert focus in this film and the way these kills are carried out and how it's like they use subtlety to get the job done. And then what that does is it allows the emotion to really be the front runner in the film.
Yeah,
We
and
focus on these relationships and we focus less on like the kills in and of themselves and more on how being a hitman affects you, affects your family, affects your family dynamics, and how you even interact with your own, with the world and your family and in yourself.
And the Chlorine Kills title is very, I think, reflective of like, what is it? Chlorine kills, it disinfects, but it also chlorine kills, like it kills relationships. It kills like it's
collateral damage.
yeah,
Collateral damage.
it's a sort of collateral damage kind of movie where like Pool Boy's character. I think one thing that I had a lot of critiques on the original from people who didn't like the film. They said that really Pool Boy does not receive his comeuppance in the first film. A lot of people said that was like a big problem, is like he kind of gets a very happy ending for a hitman who does some pretty nefarious things. And I'd like to say I think we did a pretty good job with the sequel rectifying that. I think like we gave him, I think like he's still a character that is weirdly aspirational, I think, in his quest for becoming a better person. I think he's very relatable to the average Joe, the average man, in the sense that he always wants to better himself, even though he knows he does these deplorable things. He's always trying to work to be better.
Yeah.
But I don't think we like give him. We don't go kind to him either. Like
we don't let him off.
He literally like. I mean, I think we can talk spoilers here just because like the movie,
Yes, yeah. If you don't wanna, know anything, don't watch past this point or watch the film first.
We're definitely gonna talk spoilers.
Yeah.
And then you're watching the movie behind us.
Yeah,
but like,
true.
I mean, he's literally, his dad dies, his sister dies, his best, if we call Henry his best friend or one of his friends, his friend dies. He loses his wife.
Well, and I think just by the fact that he has to be doing more killing in this film is indicative of the fact that he didn't get what he wanted in Chlorine 1. Chlorine 1, he wants out. He doesn't want to be doing anything else. He puts down the main, what I would consider the emotional climax of the film. He puts down his gun.
Yeah.
And moves on, moves forward. And he doesn't want to do it. It's the lack of trying to kill someone that is the development of his character. Yeah. And that's why I think that people that would say that he doesn't get his comeuppance, he lets that go. He lets his past and his ways go, and that's why he's able to. It's that peace that he's fine with even dying at the end of Chlorine 1.
Yeah,
that gives that feeling, and of course the fact that he has to go all out and continue to kill people in this Chlorine, is his comeuppance. The fact that he has to do
Mhm.
it again. And of
Yeah.
course, the rest of his family dying, I would say, is absolutely important to it. But the fact that he has to keep
The cycle going.
the cycle going, I think, is
And
the biggest comeuppance that his character can get.
well, we kind of at the end of this film kind of repeat the beat from the first film, but
Mhm.
it's more. I think it's done in a more sort of bittersweet kind of way because like the final moment, he still is in a situation where he's like it's gonna be him or his brother, and I think for the first time, Pool Boy starts to consider like what am I gonna do in this situation? Like, like I'm so stuck into the cycle of violence. Like, am I ever gonna get out? And they both brothers draw their guns, and Pool Boy draws his gun on his brother, and obviously he had a very clear moment to shoot him, and he doesn't. And I think it like speaks to him wanting to still get out, but still being kind of cagey from. I mean, like, let's be real, like he goes through like fucking hell through the rest of the movie. So I think we find our Pool Boy character at the end of this movie a little bit more weakened from like this is definitely the Empire Strikes Back of Chlorine movies in the sense that like
Hmm.
he's definitely not in as good of a mental place as he was in the first film.
Yeah, and there's the tense struggle of him trying to protect. He goes from Chlorine, which is he has no one.
Yeah.
He has no one that truly cares about him. He's just doing a job. To, and I think this is something that we talked about when we were coming up with this version of Chlorine, or just the next version of Chlorine Kills, was that what's the biggest difference between Chlorine 1 and the next Chlorine? Now he has stakes.
Yeah.
He's closer to family, so now he has something to protect. And that's something that we focus in on Chlorine Kills. He's protecting Henry's character. He's trying to protect the sister's character by, keeping
Her alive.
her alive, keep just staying around, keeping that relationship alive. So in a weird way, that you don't really see his true comeuppance until this film.
That's what I'm saying. I think a lot of people could say, "Oh, that he didn't have a lot of comeuppance," but I really feel like if you view Chlorine as, I'm not gonna say trilogy. Joel will freak out, but if we view it as a duology of two films,
A
right?
duology. There we go.
Duology of two films. As of right now, I really feel like they're kind of yin and yang sort of films. It's sort of like the first film is Pool Boy sort of getting himself free, and then the second film is him sort of being dragged back in. And I think like if there was to ever be more Chlorine, if there was ever to be more, I think like I'd like to make a final statement on kind of like where like what happens to Pool Boy. Is it a cycle he can never escape? Or is there an answer to that? And I have some interesting thoughts. I've ruminated on it. Obviously, that might take years for me to ruminate on in order to work it out. But I do think like he's a very interesting character. And one thing I saw in a lot of the reviews is a lot of people said cycles. There's a lot of cycles of
Hmm.
the cycle of death, the cycle of rebirth. Like this character is kind of going through these different cycles. And I think it's really interesting. How many times the character kind of gets roped back in and then is still trying to improve himself because I think that's very real to real life. Like people get into ruts and then they get out of them and they get back into them. I think that's something that's very relatable.
Yeah, I one thing I really liked about this version of the film was, again, because there's more stakes, you see so many more loose ends that affect Pool Boy in this. Because in the first one, it's just he is just on an island,
Yeah.
and that's the depressing state we find him in. And now it's like he can't catch a break. There's like his wife
Yeah.
character, there's his sister, there's his brother, there's his dad, and it's like we go from like 0 to 100,
Yeah.
like developing the character and sort of the stakes that he has.
Well,
And I think that sort of not only helps the movement of the film, the progression of the film from a story arc, but also the edit and the pace of the edit, I think is an interesting thing. One thing I also want to talk about, unless you want to hold on that, was the sort of the flashbacks, because you sort of briefly talked about it, but because this is a sequel, but we're also just putting this online for free, and we have no idea there's going to be new people watching it.
mhm.
We don't know if just our base is going to watch it or a
Yeah.
completely new base of people are going to watch it. You sort of had to hold the hands of the audience sort of in this edit.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that we both know we've struggled with is doing that, giving the our audience too much almost, where they have to like draw like a almost like squiggly lines of different
Little
like
map.
yeah like a map of connection between these characters and why this
Yeah.
matters and who's Henry and why is he hiding, and a lot of these things depend on you knowing the first Chlorine, but because of that you came with a great idea, I thought, to help the pacing of the film by putting a lot of those flashbacks in using the sepia tone style, which
Yeah.
is this is this has happened before, this is going to give you the
Yeah,
necessary
and
information.
the CPS tone style stuff was really developed on Long Con. I don't remember when I first came up with doing that. Like,
Mhm.
obviously, it's a style that people have done before, but I've never really seen it done in modern films. Like, I always see it done in like older movies, or like just kind of janky usages of it. And I always thought like sepia tone has like this really unique, almost old photograph sort of feel to it.
Mm.
And I think like in terms of the pacing of the movie, I felt like it was absolutely necessary for the audience to be up to date on what happened in the first film without holding their hands too much. Like
Yeah.
we really only, I mean, for the original Chlorine, I think we only show one clip like with the audio and all that. The rest of it's just like visuals inferring what happens. But I think it's enough for you to like that one clip, and then all the visuals we show are all kind of tied together. So as an audience member, I think you kind of understand what's going on. Like if you have like a simple idea of like how films are paced and like how movies work, like I think you can kind of understand like, oh, this guy's that guy and this guy's looking for that guy. And we do a decent job, I think, throughout the movie, like having the characters reference someone or be like, this is the enforcer's gun. And we just saw the enforcer in a flashback holding the same gun, and then we have this other moment and, who's Henry? Oh, this is Henry. Like, this is that character. Like, I think there's a lot of heavy lifting that those flashbacks have to do. And I think like there's a lot of new characters that had to be introduced in this movie. And there's a lot of ground that we have to cover with the new characters, and we
Hmm.
don't need them, grappling with the old characters we already have set up. And I think like we take a lot of trust in the audience, especially with like the pool boy character, to be like, hey, like even if you don't know who he is, you kind of know he's like doing some shady shit just based off of the other characters in the universe.
Yeah, and I think that's we can forget that this was supposed to be two films.
Yeah.
So the reason why there is all crazy amounts of characters, and I think it's absolutely just a miracle that you were able to even edit everything together, just because this was supposed to be two films worth of characters. This was not supposed to be one film. And of
Hmm.
course, because your dad passed, it really
There was no other way to
there
do
was
it.
really no other way to rectify it. But the fact that you can watch Chlorine Kills right now and it all connects and makes a cohesive story, I think is an editing, basically a miracle, basically.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've heard people say it's an editing miracle, and I think like perhaps it's just because I've been in the editing bay for the whole time. It almost not that it cheapens it, because I think it's actually a really high praise, but it's almost like it was just really a lot of tireless editing. You know what I mean? Like literally
Mm.
just like, I mean, for let's be real, it was about like 2 years of me just toiling away and trying to figure out like the exact combination. It was like trying to do like the Da Vinci Code or something, like trying to figure out like some sort of exact drop of each thing in each spot so it makes sense. And then like coming up with new scenes like constantly, like being like, oh, that we need a new character here, or oh, like so like the Joe character, the Black Cat, who was one of my favorite additions to the film because he was a complete post my dad
Mm.
passing away addition. Literally the whole thing was, what are we gonna do with the dad character? Like, how can his ethos still be in the movie? And I was looking at footage from the funeral that my brother had filmed. He had like a videography team film my dad's funeral, and this was completely independent of the production. It was just a thing that he wanted to do. And then he sent it to me, and then I looked at it and I saw us hugging, and I thought, wow, there's like a really good story there. Like in that moment, I was like, we've never used my brother for Chlorine, we've never used him for anything else. It's very plausible that my brother could be my brother in the movie because we've never really seen too much of Pool Boy's past. Like we don't.
Mm.
There's never a moment that really confirms that like, oh, his sister is his only sibling. And so that was like a really creative change, I think, to run with that. And also like the Aaron character, like we added him in, like he was a completely new addition as well because we needed someone to be like the handler character, the character who's gonna like sort of communicate with the dad character. You know, I think like it would have been easier to maybe have just made those two characters the same character and give it all to one of them, but I feel like we needed them to also, Joe's character needed to have someone he was kind of who was an antagonist to him.
Yeah.
So I think like it was more complicated to have two people, but I think ultimately I don't see it working any other way. I think like Joe's character had to still be kind of the pure, in a weird way, he's kind of the hero of Chlorine Kills. I'd almost argue like he's not like in terms of like protagonist, he's not the protagonist, but like Joe's character is really the only character in the movie that doesn't do anything like outright like completely pure evil.
Yeah, and obviously it's implied that his character has done all the
Yeah.
things that every other hitman has done in the film. But yeah, I can even recall a lot of old short films that we would do, and whenever I would have Joe help, he would always be a bad guy. He would always be
Yeah.
one of the like the guys to get out. But yeah, no, in this one he definitely plays the hero, and definitely in just the reality sense does save the film in some sense,
Yeah.
that his character can sort of take on your dad's sort of like emotional legacy that's left when he leaves the film, and then he sort of takes that role, and then allows the story to continue going on. Something I'd like to talk about, that whole craziness of what we had to deal with, is this is the benefit and the downside to independent improv filmmaking. Both the benefit being you can make things work, the downside being it can take you 3 whole years when it should have been done in maybe 2 months, 3 months. This is the benefit and the cost of doing the independent style. You can find a way out, but it's not always intuitive. It's going to take more work. How many months were we just doing nothing, thinking about, oh, what should this next scene be? How do we connect these two characters? How do you, and someone watching Chlorine Kills that might not understand everything on the first first viewership, that is the downside of it.
Yeah, and I think like I would agree and disagree because I think like I don't know if it was necessarily the format that made it that way. I think it was also the very extraordinary means of my dad passing away, and my two brothers were both in the movie, and they're not actors. Like they don't do this for a living. That to be honest, like getting them to be in the movie was hard. Like it was difficult to be like, hey, can you be in this movie? Can you act for multiple days of shooting? To be in this role, and I need you to like actually play it really seriously. You can't like ham it up, or you gotta like really do it for real. And they both took it on very well. But there was a lot of waiting for that. Like like I was busy. I was working a job as a janitor for a little bit there. I mean, I had a very hard existence for a while there, and so like I don't know if necessarily the improv nature was what really held it up. I do think it can be in a lot of productions, and I think there were moments where it did, but I do think it was like the saving grace of, because we had shot some of my stuff with my dad and it wasn't super scripted, there was a lot of like vagaries to it, like where we didn't really have to.
Let's be honest, this was a completely scripted film that had a budget.
Yeah.
They would have either been a complete reshoot,
Yeah.
or they would have scrapped the project.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that this is the benefit
Yeah.
of the improv storytelling. That this is the way I'd put it. The benefit of improv storytelling is if everything goes right, it will be the quickest
Yeah.
production. You'll have the quickest production. You will turn that around like
Yeah.
original Chlorine. But the downside is when things go wrong,
Yeah.
it can really throw things out of things that you thought were going to be important moments in the film away.
Yeah.
However, because it's improv, you can do something that you could never have done on a budget, which is just find a reason why that works, that problem works, and then continue the film.
Yeah,
and
If this was a Hollywood production, I mean, let's be real, we would have just recast my dad and we would have run from there. Like it would have been like, hey, like, well, you'll put a tribute to him at the beginning, or we'll use one of his scenes as like an outtake or something, for the end of the movie, or maybe like he can play a small character or something. They would rework it though, but like for us, there was just no reason. It was like And I think there was a moment where we definitely considered, like, is there a possibility we could just, like, cut him out? Like, is it just, like, the movie just would work better without him in it? And I think, like, that was just, like, absolutely the worst possible route to go with this movie. Like, there was so much of a heart and story in there with him, and I'm like, we would just be gutting the movie, like, absolutely gutting it. Even though we didn't have a ton of him filmed, it still was like that footage almost took on a magical quality where it was, like, sort of like it's even more valuable now, in a weird way, because it's like the last moments of this person's life, like my dad's life. These are the last moments we captured, maybe months before he passed away. Uh,
And I just want to say it's eerie how the scenes, how the story of the character of your dad in the film
Mimics.
somehow mimics real life. If you watch the film, um, it just it's I don't know if I could have drawn up a better homage
Hmm.
to your dad, in real life.
Then using footage of him,
That
like, in that seems like it fits, like, and it might be morbid, but, like, when you look at it, like, knowing how my dad passed away, knowing how everything happened, it's hard to sometimes look at those shots and be like, it almost feels like it's like I'm just watching the lore to, like, what's gonna happen to what happened to him, and it's crazy. It's sad, but, like, I mean, I think it's also beautiful that, like, I think there's moments where you can really see him channeling real emotions about things that, like, we didn't even know at the time were things he was feeling. And I think that's what's really special is, like, in his performance, he really gives it. I think he gives it his all. I mean, I think he plays a very serious but also kind of goofy character in the movie where he has these kind of more silly lines too, but, like, he still brings, like, a gravitas to the movie that, like, I don't think a younger character could have done. Like, I think, like, having, like, one big critique is, like, it's all the young guys. I think there's something really special about having, like, this one, like, older sort of old guard.
Hmm.
And I think that's something we never saw in the first Chlorine, and I think it's something that really brings it to its own level. And the second one is like, okay, now there's, like, a little bit of more class to it, or a little more seriousness, or I don't know.
Yeah, it's a classic case of the old guard. The original Chlorine starts with um, Henry's character losing his dad, and that starting this tumble, which ends up into Chlorine Kills. So if you think about it, again, the chances of what happens in Chlorine Kills happening and what happens in the original Chlorine leads to a scene at the end of this film where you and Henry are talking to each other,
Yeah.
and you are experiencing a fresh emotion that Henry feels at the beginning
Of
of
Chlorine.
Chlorine. And it's
Yeah.
when you look back at it and you sort of see these pieces that could have never considered
Predicted.
coming together, and then sort of knowing how the story sort of makes itself from reality is again a unique thing that you get with the improv style, and allowing your own emotions to bleed over to film, which what is more pure than that, right? Isn't that a goal of a cinematographer, of a director, to have the things that he knows that and sort of project that onto a story on the screen with the emotions, with music, with words, with actions.
What's crazy is there's even moments in the film, because my dad's character was supposed to pass away in the original script, which is even the crazier element. So there's moments where I think there was intentionality for us to connect things like Henry and Pool Boy and the similarities, and then it just became real
Yeah.
and just happened in a different way than we predicted, but it still happened.
Yeah, but that scene between you and Henry really wasn't
No, that was not.
ever really considered to be a.
I just mean, like, the more similar, the contrast between the characters both having the same sort of problem of losing
Yes.
their father was something we definitely did pre-plan. Them meeting and talking and dialoguing about it was definitely something we developed after my dad had died. So I'm saying
Yeah.
there's this weird bleed over from things we had actually planned as, like, a writer, like, oh, this would be a good creative moment, that they both kind of have a mirror sort of thing with their dads. And then it literally just became real, and then we were like, well, we might as well have them, like, talk about it.
Yeah, interesting. I don't remember specifically that being the intention that that was the reason why he died, so that you would be similar to Henry's character. But
I don't think it was like a direct thing. Like I don't think it was like something like that was like, oh, that's why it happens. I just think it was like a neat little coincidence,
yeah,
perhaps.
yeah, no, yeah, it definitely was a coincidence, and because it doesn't matter if you spoil the original idea at least, but the idea was that your dad died at the very end as the climax of the first
Mm.
sequel to Chlorine.
Yeah, he dies at the very end. It's in a gunfight, and then basically, it's a three-way gunfight between him, the other enforcer character that would have been played by another old guard kind of character, and then Pool Boy. Um, and what ends up happening is basically the old guard guy shoots my dad shoots him, and then he's like still fine, like he's shot, but he's like not dying just yet. And then he basically calls Pool Boy to a final duel, and it's a 1v1 duel basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then it would have ended with them, and then there was going to be more flashbacks where the dad character, it would take place in the 90s, and it was going to be his character. Pool Boy was going to have a recollection of his dad, like when he lost his dad for the first time, like in the sense of like his dad being taken away to like prison or jail or something like that. And there was going to be this moment where he was going to get like thrown on the hood of the car, and like little Pool Boy is like watching it sort of.
Hmm.
And he has this moment when they're in the gunfight and they pull their guns, and then he realizes the dad just kind of tosses the gun, and then the song ends basically as the dad is falling over and Pool Boy holds him and realizes that his father has changed, and he does care about, his family and the man he thought.
His warped sense of care for his
Yeah.
family,
Yeah.
which still is used in this film, which is the like, sometimes to love someone, you gotta not let your drama ever spill over to them.
Yeah.
Which is it's a deep type of experience, and something that's built from thinking of what would you be in, how would you deal if you're a hitman and you had a family, like how would you
Mhm.
you would never want them to ever
Yeah.
sort of follow in your footsteps in that sense, because you know how destructive it can be
Yeah.
and how deadly it can be and how dangerous it can be. But yeah, I think that even in this version, Chlorine Kills version of it, I think it's still we still are all able to hold that emotion and follow that through your dad's character in the film.
Yeah. And I think honestly, I almost would like to argue I think the version with Joe at the end is almost better. Like I feel like it maybe makes more narrative sense. Because I think like them both being like angry at each other about their father's death, and like sort of they're causing some family distance. I just feel like it feels real. It just feels real to me, and it kind of weirdly reminds me of an ending of a show that I know you don't like too very much. Death Note. It actually really reminds me of the L plot line. Spoilers for Death Note, but L's character dies about 20 some episodes into the show, and there's about like 10 episodes after, and then it sort of breaks off into these other characters, and they're the ones that kind of wrap up the story against the main antagonist. And I kind of weirdly feel like I was inspired a little bit by that moment when I was thinking about it. I was thinking like the brother character is kind of like the near mellow version of dad's character, like in a weird way. He's sort of like maybe not as imposing and maybe not as grand as the dad character, but like he definitely is just as essential to wrapping up the plot. So that was the one inspiration when I was coming up with the story was Death Note.
Of course it was Death Note. Of course, which is a legendary anime.
It's a great anime.
It's so good.
It's a controversial ending. I think some people love it, some people hate it. I love it. I think it's a great ending.
As soon as Elle died, I checked out. I said, "Sorry, that's the only reason I was watching this. Goodbye. Thank you very much."
Don't check out of our movie, please.
No, it's Well, something I wanted to talk, just looking at the funeral scenes here during the film, was how does it feel to have actual footage of an actual event? I mean, because we're in the business of, we have an idea for something, we're dramatizing it.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a dramatization. This is an actual documentary of your dad's funeral,
Mm-hmm.
and that's you actually at
Look,
the open casket,
yeah.
which I thought about it, and it doesn't make sense if you said he got shot in the face 5 times, but it's fine.
Yeah, no,
I don't think that it's small, like inconsistency that I don't think
yeah, it's one
makes any sense. But
it's one little moments of inconsistency that like
I don't even, probably shouldn't even brought it up, but I don't know why.
no,
My brain just has
that
to.
that's fine. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think like whatever it is, who could be speaking in an abstract way, but either way, even if it's just a mistake, I don't think it really matters too much. But to your more serious point, I don't know. I think it weirdly feels fictional now, like because it's in the movie and it plays amongst the fictional footage. I've looked at it so many times, and obviously I was there and I experienced the very real nature of it. It almost just feels different now. Like, and I don't mean like less so. It just feels different. Like it just feels like, uh, weirdly, I think it let me accept it more. Just from the aspect of like I've looked at it so many times, like it just doesn't even feel like the moment that it felt when it happened.
Hmm.
It feels like a different way now. Like when it was originally happening, it felt very like impossibly intense. And I think it's the long lens, the distance from it, the distance from those emotions. It just doesn't feel the same way. And not in a lesser way. Just I don't think it feels as disabling for me to watch.
Yeah, I we're looking up some of the reviews of the film, and one of the commenters discussed the religious themes in Chlorine Kills, because we did have religious themes in Chlorine, and it was more of like a side quest type.
Mm-hmm.
Just he sort of happens upon a Bible and starts to think about it, and I think we use it in Chlorine to just sort of have the contrast of like what he does and what would be something that would be,
Helpful for him.
well, helpful, but also like the counterpoint to draw him away from what
Mm-hmm.
he's doing, and sort of the grief or the um just the guilt over what
Yeah.
he does. I think is a good sort of tandem. Obviously, I'm a Christian, and that's something that I think is important and to put into my own work. But with that funeral scene as well, that message I think is critical to um, your dad's
Mm-hmm.
character, storyline, arc,
Yeah.
and the importance of the following scenes, and how you and your brother
Mm-hmm.
develop your relationship together. I just thought it'd be important to sort of bring that up.
Yeah. No, I
Um,
mean, I think those scenes were scenes that really I felt it just felt consistent with the first film. Like, I think the initial intention was for the second film was it wasn't going to be as religious as the first, just in the sense that like it didn't make sense when we originally wrote it. And I think like it sort of just crept in there once we had this newer version. I think there was really just no other way
a little bit
to
of divine intervention, Dan.
perhaps.
That's the way I choose to look
Yeah,
at it. I think
yeah.
it was.
I think definitely could have been that. Because I think it was definitely not planned to be that way. It definitely became that way. And I'm very happy for those scenes. I think they're good scenes. I mean, I think there was definitely a version that could have been very neutered of the funeral that didn't really like uh go with the religious themes as much. But I tried to stick with it because I thought it felt consistent with the movie.
Yeah, it's talking about hitmen. They are creating loss by the fact that they have to end people.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think what makes a story like that compelling, obviously, is that to have any sort of come up, it's the hitman has to deal with loss himself. And I think that's your dad's character, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
comes to terms with, I've done all this so that I don't impact my son and
Yeah.
his job in the business, and now I'm getting roped right back into it.
Yeah, and to basically kill his son or potentially kill his son.
Yeah, and which is the final scene of your dad's character, which is the most, in my opinion, the most emotional part, for me. Obviously, it could be for you as well, but
Yeah.
don't want to just add that in. But yeah, that's something that you just look at and you're like, it's hard, and I love that that scene comes through, that you feel that way. The
Yeah.
irony of the hitman going through deep emotions of loss and possible loss, and sort of he's lived his whole life to get to this point where it hasn't spilled over on his family. Obviously, it has. Spoiler
Yeah.
alert, it has. Um, and then he does the only thing that he feels like he can do: get me out.
Yeah. I was thinking, it would be really fun, and this is just theorizing a little bit about, like, I think it would be so much fun to do a movie about, like, the dad character, like, in the 1980s, 1990s. Like, okay, if he's like 20, like, or like 18 or 19 in the flashbacks, he'd be like 20, 30 in the 1980s. I think it would be a really interesting direction to, like, go into his character a little bit more, whether it be a short or whether it be a feature. I don't know. I was thinking about that the other day, and I think that would be an interesting. Like, I feel like there's a lot of, like, fertile ground there that's not connected to too much.
I mean, it's obviously connected to the intro, sort of intro with your other brother Johnny, who plays
But beyond,
your dad's younger version.
but yeah, beyond that, like, a character that's 10 years older than that character could look like anyone, and there's not too much, like, Chlorine lore that's back in that area. So, like,
Mm.
there's a lot of, like, like, very fertile ground to create a unique story with that. And I think that the dad character is so interesting. I would love to maybe, at some point, either it be a script or a film or maybe just a short or something like that. I think it would be fun to flesh that out a little bit more, just because I think, like, there's so much his character can be still developed without my dad's presence, and I think my dad does such an amazing job playing him in the movie. But I think the character beyond just my dad is cool too. Like, I think it was just a cool character, and I think, like, there's so much lore that we can add to it with just, developing maybe what his relationship to a younger pool boy would look like, and how did he, come to be, and how did pool boy learn to get into this business. I think there's a lot of interesting stories in the past too, and not necessarily that we're gonna develop them into movies, but just was a random thought when I was watching it the other night.
Yeah, I already like what was done with the young version of your dad. You talk about loss. Obviously, one of his first scenes is sort of getting used to that. I
Yeah.
mean, I think, in a business like this, if you were to sort of bring it out to its logical conclusion, most characters are going to get numb to that idea of loss and
Mm.
danger quite quickly. And then you see that with his character. He immediately befriends someone who sort of brings him in, which is a father figure, which is sort of a need that he has, obviously,
Hmm.
in a place that he's been driven to. And then immediately it's like, nope, something goes wrong. He loses him.
Yeah.
And then learns very quickly to not emotionally connect to anyone, because
Yeah.
you really can't in this type of world.
Yeah.
And to sort of have that fleshed out in the past, obviously that's the first step. That doesn't mean he's already
Yeah.
has that aura about him. He needs to get to some other point to
Yeah.
really, really get you to feel, wow, this is all it. It doesn't just take one thing, and we as humans change. It takes a multitude of events to get us to a certain breaking point,
Yeah.
to get us to live that way. And I think I agree that it would be a very interesting story to see, how did that story snowball to get him to be so avoidant that he would basically just forget about his whole family in order to protect them.
Well, and I think it would be interesting just from the perspective. I don't even think, like, as a Chlorine movie, like, even just as its own standalone, like, that didn't have any references to the other films. If it was just like a standalone film about his story, I think there could be something there that, like, yes, we could have little references to chlorine if we wanted to. But I think even just as a standalone film, I think the character is compelling enough that we could jump off from the point of what we know of the character and really build a unique story there. Don't want to get too sidetracked into a random chlorine thing, but I was thinking about that the other day. I thought it'd be interesting to bring up on the podcast. Vibing with this scene right here.
Yeah, Chlorine, like I said, it's slow cinema. It's we let the audience breathe and sort of take in the setting, the context of where these characters are living in. A lot of outdoor, sort of wooded areas end up being close parks, end up being,
Yeah.
the settings for our characters. How would you say the improv style changed from Chlorine 1 to Chlorine 2? How would you sort of say that? Maybe from you can also go from cinematography, but you can also go from sort of the story conceptualizing as well.
I think we were much more focused this time around, is despite the fact that we had a lot more randomness that happened. We definitely had more of a focused idea. I feel like the original Chlorine really started with me just shooting footage, and then it was literally like, oh, I have this idea about a hitman. He's a pool boy, and blah blah blah, and he does all this stuff. And there's like random scenes that were completely cut out of the original Chlorine that like literally are so weird and goofy. And there's a part where pool boy gets high and the pool turns green. And
I don't even remember that.
you never seen that?
No, I
There's a
think
pool.
I get a little inkling, but I don't even remember that.
Yeah, pool boy gets really high, and then he goes to the pool, and then he like the pool starts changing colors, and then
Oh,
there's a part where he's in the kitchen, and then he starts slapping his face. And there's like a bunch of little deleted scenes that just like they don't really add to anything, and they were just like early test footage kind of. Things I wanted to put in the movie. And then there's the very classic mirror shot that Joel roasted me for, so that did not end up in the film either.
I am not a fan of mirror shots, but funnily enough, we have in Chlorine Kills, your dad's mirror shots are very
Very tastefully done.
closely tied to, sort of his forgetfulness, his sort of self-medication,
Yeah.
trying to deal with just
And
yeah.
that moment was really cool because we use it 3 times in the movie, and it's all from the same batch of footage, and some of it's just zoomed in shots. And I think we get so much out of that considering we
Mm.
only had one shoot day. And ideally in a better world, we would have, filmed multiple scenes with my dad
Are
doing
you
that.
telling me there was only one shoot day? There's no way. We shot more than one day with your dad. Are you serious? One?
For the pill stuff, that's only one day.
No, I'm saying just in general.
No, no, no.
Oh, okay.
No. It
I thought
was
that somehow we had shot
one.
all that footage in one day. That'd be
Let
insane.
me think about it. It was,
Yeah, it had to be more than one.
I think it was less than 5. I think it was 4. Because there was the day with Anna, there was the pills, there was the day at Ed's house, and then there was all the driving stuff. So I want to say it was 4 days, but
Hmm.
it was not 4 long days. It was like 2-3 hours a piece each day. He was only on set for a couple hours each day. I mean, in total, I think we have probably less than an hour of, maybe hour or 2 of footage of him. Despite the fact that he ends up being in a decent amount of runtime of the movie,
Hmm.
he's not. We don't have too much footage of him. Like we use literally everything on
Every single piece of footage. Yeah, and that I don't know. Just hearing about the driving scenes leads me down to another,
Yeah.
the most iconic scenes in Chlorine, outside of the
Mhm.
pool scenes, which of course directly
Yeah.
connect to the word chlorine. But if I had to show, if someone asked me, so what is Chlorine about?
Yeah.
I almost want there to be a montage of driving scenes that they could just literally just be driving where it's just needle drops plus driving scenes.
That might actually be a really good video.
It's like Chlorine, but just the driving scenes. I could see that right now
We
being
we
with the
should totally
video.
do that. Just cut out all the sound. Cut it all and just put
Put needle drops.
like just put like a mix of needle drops that just plays in with radio.
Because the one of my favorite parts of the original Chlorine is the driving scenes with those 2 songs you did
Yeah.
with the where it's like the sunset on your face.
Yeah.
And the oh my goodness.
Alfie Finney
Alfie Finney. Oh my
by
goodness.
ooh,
Oh come on, Dad. Come on, cat. You can't. We got to give credit where it's
I
due.
want to say it's American Orchestra or something like
Okay.
that. It's something like a Earth Earth Opera.
So that I think that might be it. But Alfie Finney, that song. Oh my
That's
goodness.
what. Yeah, I think it's the best needle drop of the first film.
When you talk about vibes, and
Yeah.
I think that's what a lot of people have ascribed to Chlorine, is just it's a vibe based movie. And
Yeah.
obviously, we wanted to keep that for Chlorine Kills because obviously,
Yeah.
surprise, surprise, that there's a driving scene right behind us. But how much of our lives is just driving from place to
Yeah.
place and with the music on, and where we just have a time to sort of self assess, to take something in. And it turns out a lot of these driving scenes are right after very emotionally
Yeah.
or before emotionally important
Yeah,
scenes.
and we obviously did not get the same amount this time around due to like unfortunate circumstances with my dad's passing that made it so we couldn't really use the van. Um but I think we did what we could with it. Oh, I feel like this is like comeuppance for Long Con, like she gets away in Long Con and she's happy and then in this film, it's just like the dark timeline. Like,
Yeah, we don't let our characters just live peaceful lives
yeah, I
in
think.
the most extreme way.
Well, I think it's just boring cinema if you don't like give like. I think Pool Boy. I think when we talked about the Jessica death scene, I remember we had the wife character and we had the Jessica character, the sister character, and we had very early on figured out the wife character was going to get away and drive off into the sunset, kind of have the like sort of like I'm gonna escape sort of mindset, start over, start fresh. And then the sister character wasn't going to die. It was originally like Pool Boy was going to sacrifice himself or he was going to die or something. And I think the more we realized, I'm like, that's not satisfying, like to an audience member. Like Pool Boy really doesn't lose anything. And obviously, this was pre the dad. Like we hadn't really figured out exactly what was going to happen with that. And ultimately, I think the Jessica death scene was like so needed because I feel like their relationship was kind of tied up by the time we got to that point. Whereas like
Things are going great because the film starts with basically their relationship being like repaired.
mended,
Yeah,
and I think like they get to a point where they obviously love and care about each other, like from a brother sister perspective. um so I think there was really nothing more to do with them. Like it just kind of felt like if we kept them going, it would just kind of peter out to being just kind of boring.
yeah.
And I think like had we kept her along, I just don't see how that would have improved the movie. Like I think Pool Boy really needed to have some loss and some stakes in order to really get in there. And like Pool Boy does not fire a gun until so deep into this movie.
Mm.
I think one thing I really wanted to keep sure from the first film is that his sacrifice of putting the gun down and giving up was serious. And he really does not use a gun until it is absolutely no more other options. Like he watches his sister get brutally murdered in front of him, and then he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna pick up the gun again." And I feel like that moment just gives me so much. Oh, it feels so good. It feels so good because it feels like it's earned. It doesn't feel like a cheap like
Yeah.
we come back and 10 minutes in someone dies and then he's like, "Yeah, I got my gun back." Like,
Well, I think it's not really original. Not that that's a huge problem, but there's got to be. You can't just be a hitman for your entire life and then just stop it and just assume everything's going to work out. And
yeah,
it's just you'll see it in every single like hitman gangster
but
movie where there's that moment where you think you can make it out, like and I
what I think is unique about what we do is that for at least the Chlorine Kills movie, like we really drag it out. Like
yeah.
we do not like immediately give the audience the satisfaction of like, oh, Pool Boy's coming back. He's got his gun. Like, and I think that it really benefits the movie if you stick with it. That like you get to see some really cool badass Chlorine Kills. Like I think like the first.
Chlorine Kills.
Yeah, you get some Chlorine Kills in the movie. Like you get some good moments, and I feel like overall, like the first film, I think a lot of people always are like, "Yeah, man, it was like such a badass movie." I'm like, it's really not. Like the first film is like really sad. Like it's really sad, and like all the kills are like these pathetic people that like Pool Boy like kills a junkie.
Yeah.
He kills a salesman who literally like has like a wife and kids. Um you know, he kills the other guy he kills has a son who's coming over. And he's like, lay my body. So like, you know, like all the kills that Pool Boy does, they're all like pathetic, sad. Like it's kind of interesting. Like in the first film, he never really kills anyone. He doesn't even kill you. Like Henry kills you. So like Pool Boy only kind of kills like defenseless people in the
Mm.
first film. So it's interesting
But in creative ways.
in creative ways. Yeah.
But yeah, I can understand why people would be like, "Oh, I don't see like that's not a hitman. That's just a guy that sort of like does these like really like
Yeah.
weird ways of he just sort of goes along with it,
Yeah.
optimizes what's the best way to do it." But there is no doubt if you watch Chlorine Kills that your character is a hitman. The efficiency of the
Yeah.
scene that will be coming up over our shoulders quite soon. Um, Glad this moment comes up because you had talked about how going on the chlorine theme, Nathan Cash, who plays the enforcer's brother, my character's brother, who's basically taking vengeance for my death in the film. Not if you'll just look at him just aesthetically, it's like that'd be a cool guy. I'm sure that's a cool guy to get to know, and of course he is. But you don't see, man. I would cast that person as a hitman. But this scene where he is threatening
Yeah.
you over the phone, which another chlorine, if I had another supercut, it would be phone calls. Phone calls on every scene, almost not every scene, but a lot of scenes are phone calls
Yeah.
in the chlorine thing. But anyway, this scene, you really see the range of Nathan Cash's character, and to have this monologue here, I think is definitely one of his best moments in the film. You
Yeah.
see his characterization sort of show, and the regretfulness of the violence that he is about to inflict.
Yeah.
It
I think
is poignant.
it's a really unique moment because it's so funny because it's like the most Hollywood moment we've done in a movie in a while, where it's like very much like the bad guy is gonna tell you the plan, and it's just so I don't know, it's such a fun moment because I feel like it plays into the stereotype of like what it is, and then it just goes to shit for him. Like he like just gets his team just gets screwed up. Like I saw one comment that said Mason was my favorite because they had seen The Mentor, and he's like, why didn't he do anything? He got shot a bunch. Like like his buddies all got killed, and then he died.
Yeah. So another thing I want to go into is the CCU, the Chlorine Cinematic Universe. It's even weird to even say that. Obviously, it's nowhere close to Marvel or whatever because this is just independent films doing independent film things. But to even say that, we made Chlorine, and then to see that others in the independent folk filmmaking space saw it and were hyped enough to make their own addition to the universe of our characters is an honor. Just to see those works and to see how cool and awesome they were. So I sort of wanted to just have to see your perspective on it, and how does it feel to be the creator of a universe where other filmmakers are,
It's fucking weird, man.
yeah, isn't it weird?
It's fucking
Isn't it
weird.
weird?
It's weird because it's like I feel like the original Chlorine is such a standalone movie that I never really, like even though I was planning on doing a sequel, even that still never felt like, like, oh, it's like this big universe. It just was like, oh, I just make another movie. Like the first one did good, let's do another one.
Yeah.
Like very like in a very sort of shrewd just businessman sort of way. You're just kind of like, well, it does well, we should do another one, Like you don't even think about it as like this grander thing. And then, it really started with The Mentor, Nathan saying it, and then there's talk is cheap and people say stuff and they say, oh, I'm gonna make a movie. I'm gonna make a feature film in your universe to make another character. And I'm like, okay, sure. Like, go ahead, do that. Like,
Let's see.
let's see. And then Nathan, and Caleb did the hard work and they dropped it. And then, not too long after that, Jordan dropped Little Black Submarines, and then not too long after that, I was out in New Jersey and I made No Job with Cody Clark, which is like I'd like to say the first like fully officially sanctioned Chlorine film, in the sense that I'm like literally like in the whole movie. So it was interesting because I got to be a part of the process of that. But like I love the fact that they went and did their own thing, and then I didn't really have too much say in it because I think it allowed for a much better result. I think like had I like controlled it, I don't think it would have. I don't know if it would have been better. I think like it's nice to let the filmmakers breathe and do what they wanted to do. Like each one, Cody, Caleb and Nathan, and Jordan, Ethan, and Zach. I think they all had their unique visions for these movies, and I think like who am I to judge and say like what should or shouldn't be Chlorine? Like Chlorine is not even. It's just a movie. It's just a movie. Like, and so like yes, there are rules and there are sort of you know a dogma, I think, to like what the films are about. And I think for the most part, I think the majority of the movies have stuck to that dogma of like what is family, what is relationships, all this stuff. And they all have, moments that connect to the greater story. Um, I think I would be interested to see what we could all do together as like a giant Chlorine, like a giant, like really pull it all together. Like, you know, I would love to work with all the filmmakers mentioned to make a film. If I was ever going to do a Chlorine 3, I would really like to get Cody Clark to play the villain. Actually, that was me and him had talked about this.
Nice.
And I think Cody would be the perfect villain for the final film. But he would only be a voice actor. It'd be all over the phone, and there would be a physical presence playing, like being him. Um,
Nice. Nice. Okay.
that was kind of the direction I would go with the third film. And I think like the characters in Little Black Submarines could totally tie into a third Chlorine.
Oh, absolutely.
Like they're in a place where it would work. And unfortunately for Nathan, he's dead in the movie. But
Oh.
I think like the DNA of all that stuff could be referenced in the third film too.
Interesting. I love that idea. I think that'd be a super.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the whole CCU getting back together, the Avengers of the Chlorine Cinematic
Well,
Universe.
I think it would be cool if the final film like started almost like fresh, because I feel like we kind of wiped the whole cast out in this movie. Like realistically, there's only like a few characters. Like okay, the wife character's alive, I'm alive, the brother character's alive. Everyone else is gone.
Yeah.
Like they're all wiped out. So like it's a very fresh slate. Considering
Hmm.
realistically of going forward, it's really just me, like who's left. And so I think we could bring in the characters from Little Black Submarines and like bring in like Cody to play like the main villain and like start fresh and do something. you know I kind of envision the final film being like if there was going to be one, like a road trip movie, and it would be basically we look more into Pool Boy's past and his days of more petty crime.
Well, if you go into his past, then you can bring everybody back.
Yeah, and that
Which actually I think would be a pretty cool.
his more days of petty crime and like stealing, and like it's referenced in the past that he definitely had a life of like stealing and doing more like heists and stuff. And potentially he screwed over Cody Clark's character and maybe he wants revenge.
Oh, okay. And then
And
you can add more like meeting the characters that
yeah,
we've known
and
or he already knows by the beginning of
and,
Chlorine.
and I think there would be like an old flame, like an old like someone he used to pull these jobs with and do different jobs with, and that character. I think the idea would be that Cody basically starts off this race and basically is like, like I know you love this girl, like I know that you love this person, this is someone from your past, and like you both screwed me over,
Hmm.
and like you have 7 days to get there before we do, or we're gonna kill you both. That was kind of where I was thinking of going, and
Oh, I like that.
I think the final film could be a real. If it was, I don't want to spoil too much.
Spoiler film hasn't been made.
Yeah, but
This
I
is
mean, like,
hilarious.
but
This
like,
is how, guys. This is how it. The funny thing is, Dan spoils everything. Every film, he will spoil it. We'll talk about it, and he'll spoil it in conversation, and then I'll say, Dan, now I can't watch the film. But he will not spoil his own non-made idea.
I was gonna say that and then go into a little bit more, but
Oh gosh.
I think the final film would be a statement on Pool Boy finally learning that you can't run. Like, ultimately, the final film is this giant race, and he's running from his past. He's running from the main bad guys. He's running towards this girl that he loves. He's running from everything that has led unto this point. And I think the final conclusion of the Chlorine franchise could be Pool Boy just doesn't he doesn't need to run anymore. That basically he's accepted his fate that someday that someone's going to come in and burst down that door and come after him. But like he's happy and he's peaceful where he's at. And I think that that is ultimately where I think the story will lead. I think
Interesting.
is an acceptance that the cycle will never end. It's just what his participation in it.
That's a very Chlorine 1 finale, emotional ending of Chlorine 1.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Because he's on the run. I like that. He's like, he keeps running away and it keeps following him. And there's really no way to. He just finally gets to the place where there's no point in trying to run.
I'll pitch you the rest of it after this because I think.
Wow. Well, there you go. It took however many, maybe an hour and 10 minutes, hour and 15 minutes before you got some possible juicy looks into the next Chlorine film. I think the viewers watching this should feel lucky.
And we should probably wrap this up before the film ends. I don't know if we should let them see that. I think that they should have to watch the real film on YouTube. I do appreciate everyone checking out this podcast, but I want to give you the whole thing. You gotta at least, if you want to see the ending, at least how it happens.
I know you hate spoilers, Dan. I know you hate spoilers.
As I just spoiled the whole thing. But any final things to say before we wrap up?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's I thought the Long Con would forever be our most difficult feature film. Obviously not so. Chlorine Kills was absolutely arduous. One of the most difficult things to ever make. And yeah, I as you probably are, I'm pretty done with the film. I'm pretty. It's just been as the years have gone on. I said this in a comment form, but as the years have gone on, I have felt further and further away from Chlorine Kills, and I think that's a sign that it is time to
just drop the sucker,
and let others sort of experience afresh. I'll never be able to watch the film and fully sort of get it. From our audience perspective, and I don't think you will either. I mean, you've sort of watched it so many times in the editing room, but I just want to say thank you for those who did end up watching it, because a lot of heart was there, a lot of work, a lot of effort went into it, and we do want to get to the point one day where we can, put our films in, major theaters and something like that. But it's cool to also see the process where we came from and sort of how we're getting there, and we will be making more films like Chlorine Kills and are excited to do so. But
and I'm just so excited to have the film out. I think there's nothing more exciting than the potential of starting fresh with a new slate on whatever projects we do in the future. But Chlorine Kills was a guttural gut punch of a story that really weirdly is about a theme that a lot of my films have been about, is like nostalgia and really, living in the past and living in the present. And I don't know. I feel like the movie is is a good statement on it, and I'm just so excited to move past it in the sense that I think it's a really good story. But I'm so excited for the stories we're going to tell in the future, and I think you should check it out. I think it's a great movie. And I just thank you if you've listened to this podcast this long. So
peace, guys. We'll see you next week.
You have a good one. Bye-bye.